Hey, welcome back to the Circle of Knowledge podcast. This is your host, John Kovach Jr. with Amplified Minds. I'm super excited to introduce our guest speaker today, James Stephenson. And James is a good friend of ours and someone who we've worked with a lot. And we are just extremely excited to share with him or share with you some of the topics and discussions that we had with James. Now, James has a few resources and some ideas and some opportunities to offer to you that will help you increase your life and your business and even your marriage. So we're excited to introduce this conversation, and we hope you'll learn a lot. James, thanks for being on the show with us. I am really, really excited to have this conversation with you. And I wanted to preface with our audience to just kind of give an introduction to you by allowing you the stage or the floor to talk a little bit about your upbringing and, just introduce yourself. Who is James? And kind of tell us a little bit about your story before you became who you are today. I'd love to have that story shared, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that'd be great, John. Thank you. And let me thank you again for the opportunity to do this. I appreciate the opportunity. A little bit, I guess, about my backstory. I don't want to go too far back. Grew up in what would be I'd consider it a poor family. I mean, I didn't think of it back then, but Mom used to mix powdered milk with our regular milk because she was raising 5 kids by herself back when that was less common. And we had what we needed, but grew up, got to college, got an engineering degree, went to work for 15 years in the auto industry in Michigan, and loved it back there. And now back here in Utah, which is our home, for about 12 years. And, the irony of it is I felt the need to be closer to Mom, particularly in home. And so we moved back 12 years ago, came to a job that sounded really cool. It was working for a rocket motor company. We make rockets. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. As an engineer, it was pretty neat. But I found that after it took a couple months to realize that I really hated my job. And and so that drove me to start looking for, holy cow, how can I replace my income without having to move my family again? And kind of felt trapped, frankly, for about 4 years. So forced me out of my comfort zone. And the good news is I learned a lot of different lessons. I wrote the book, Small Steps, Big Feet, about some of those as I went through that process. And then one area led to another. And, you look back and the challenges you have in life are really, I call them gifts. Problems are your greatest gifts, wrapped in a problem. It's something in there for you to learn. And, it doesn't feel like it when you're going through it, but that's kind of how I got to where I'm at right now. I don't know if that's enough of a backstory for you or not. But.
It's a great synopsis. I would follow up and ask, so how did you get started in coaching and speaking and training? How did you get your start with that?
And that's kind of accidental too. It was actually when I was back in Michigan. The company I worked for, I was an engineer, but I got into program management, really enjoyed the program management. When we launched an enterprise product launch system, and so we had to, it was new for everyone. We got, the auto industry is great because every 4 years you're putting out a new product. Rocket motors, not so often, but cars, they got to be updated. They're updated every 2 years, and then every 4 years you got a whole new model. And so you're constantly going through new product launches. And that was my job, to launch the new product. Well, we bought this enterprise-wide software to help facilitate that. Really good, but as you can imagine, getting everyone to understand how to use it and actually implement it. So I was working really closely with the IT guys, but I found myself having to I was going to Mexico, going to Canada, to our plants in the US, teaching them how to use the software. And it kind of became fun thing for me. My wife used to be a teacher. Well, you should do a game, and I thought, well, cool, we'll do a game. So we were playing, what is that one? Vanna White, whatever that game is. Where you guess,
or
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune, yeah. And so we did that. I converted this new product launch system into that. And I found that I really, really enjoyed the training aspects of helping people understand stuff in a way that actually worked and was fun. And so I come out here to where I live now in the rocket motor company. I was in a managerial role. I call it was a toxic work environment. It really was. There are some out there. It's unfortunate. Again, the gift that was wrapped in that problem for me was pushing me to higher levels, which is a really good thing, because I never would have done it. Never, ever would have done what I've done if I'd liked my job. I'd still be working there today, and nothing wrong with that, I guess. But if we're not meeting our full potential, then there is really something wrong with it. And sometimes it takes the uncomfortable to push us to that next level. And that was kind of my experience. But after 4 years in that environment, I started down this path where I was starting companies. I was investing in real estate. I was learning things that I hadn't ever done before. I was spending money in ways I never would have before, personal development, growth, things like that, getting coaches and mentors. Never, ever would have done that stuff. I would have been, that's for other people that have problems. Well, now I was the guy with the problems. But after 4 years of that toxic work environment, I actually switched jobs, and I was in our training department again, and the position opened up. I actually took it. It was a $20,000 a year pay cut to do it. But again, it felt like it was what I should be doing. And that also helped me continue to develop the opportunity to coach and mentor. That was in the corporate world, but really enjoyed the training aspects of it. It wasn't exactly what I'd anticipated there, but it helped bridge that gap, or bridge that to go onto my own, starting my Triumph Training Company and coaching and mentoring individuals through very similar processes that I'd come through. Hopefully shortcutting it for them and making it a lot less painful, but sometimes the pain is what we grow from. So
sometimes the pain is the actual experience and the journey. Yeah. I love that. So from corporate coaching and training to personal coaching and training, what does that transition look like? And what would you, if there was a bucket, because we don't want to place ourselves in a bucket, but if there was a bucket or a title to place what kind of coaching that you provide to the world, what would you give that a title? What name would you give it?
What people would most relate to, and I almost cringe when I say this, is life coach. And I hesitate to say that because my perspective of a life coach is, someone that doesn't know what they're doing, but they want to help other people, and they say, I'm going to be a life coach. I tend to focus on the wealth. For me, it's a wealthy life. In fact, that's what I wrote about in the book, Small Steps, Big Feet, was kind of the 4 pillars. There's actually a 5th that I didn't cover in there, but the 4 pillars that in my mind make up a wealthy life. If you say wealthy life, most people think of what? Finances, right? It's your money. Wealth is all about money. Well, it's not really all about money. You can have a lot of money and your life can suck. That's not a wealthy life in my book. In fact, that's kind of the life I was living. When I came out of this job, our finances were at the peak of what they've been after, 20 years in a professional career. You would expect some. They weren't what they probably should have been, but we were comfortable financially. But it sucked. I hated going to work. I had to force myself to go to work and do this positive talk on my commute out there that it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. And then just it was not fun. So a wealthy life is not made up of just a good bank account. And that's why I don't like to call it life coach. Really a wealthy life coach. Other aspects that I write about in here, and these kind of parallel the journey, John, that I went through, was, a goal setting process. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, if you have a system for setting goals, you're going to accomplish it in half the time or less. And if you don't, then you probably won't ever get there, frankly. You probably just won't. So that's one component is setting goals. Now that can affect any aspect of your life, whether it's your business, whether it's your health, trying to lose weight, whatever else. So that I've got as one component. The other one is personal growth. And it's kind of interesting, and this is just a path that I came through. I don't know that honestly, it is part of the formula that I teach people now, but and I've tried to order it, not necessarily for me, it was, okay, finances. I got to figure this out because I'm tired of working here. Yet I've got a mortgage. I've got a family. I got to put food on the table. And I don't want to relocate them again. At that time, we had a bunch of kids in school. That's a tough time to drag your kids around the country, right? So I started looking at a real estate investment. And so I started investing in real estate. Way out of my comfort zone. Never would have done it otherwise. But the finance piece started doing it. Well, I'd go to real estate club meetings, and one of the luncheons I snuck off to on my lunch hour was a guy mentioned a book that I said, this book has changed my life. And so I'm all curious about it. It doesn't tell us what it is until the end. A very smart guy from a marketing standpoint, right? Well, it was Darren Hardy's Living Your Best Year Ever, and I've used that for the last 4 years as a goal setting system. Well, then I started listening to him, and he talks about health and particularly about weight. You know, whose fault is it if you're overweight? You know, it sounds like that's kind of a blunt question. And in fact, when I was writing that section in my book, the editor said, you know what, she was very tactful, you're going to alienate a lot of people. You're going to piss a lot of people off if you're that blunt, because it's your fault. And frankly, I'm looking in the mirror when I say that. You know, who puts food in your mouth? Is it you or somebody else? It's only you. So, but anyway, so I've got, now I'm going into financial growth and development. I'm going into goal setting systems like I'd never done before. Now, I've set goals in the past, but this was an actual system. And if you apply it and consistently do it, then it's going to make a difference. And it does. And that led to personal development. Now I'm listening to Darren Hardy. I'm listening to a whole bunch of other different mentors, coaches, you know, personal growth experts. And I'm starting to sign up for workshops and seminars on my own dime. I'm traveling out of state to go attend workshops. I never would have done that. You know, the company paid for it fantastic. And I loved those when I could get them. But now I'm investing in it on myself because I want it, as opposed to, hey, it'd be neat. I know the company's going to pay for it, and I get some value out of it, which I did. But now I'm doing it on my own. So kind of rambling here. I don't mean to. But those are kind of the different parts of my journey, the finances, the personal development, the goal setting system, and then the health piece that became part of my journey as well, too. Lost 30 pounds 3 years ago and kept that off and maintained my ideal body weight. So I look at those components as being the components of a wealthy life. So life coach, yeah, but I call it a wealthy life coach if I got to brand it.
I absolutely love that. And I wanted to dig that hole just a little bit because we do talk to a lot of life coaches, and there have been life coaches on the show, but I love the definition of true wealth. And that's actually a topic that our listeners are constantly seeking to learn more about. And I'm super excited that they get to hear this from you, James, because we do not define wealth as a financial status. When people say, oh, I'm seeking financial freedom, what they really don't understand is that it's not financial freedom they're seeking, but it's balance, it's wealth. It's a wealth in regards to health, finances, relationships, and a few other topics, which I know you'll be able to discuss a little bit more. But I love that is your message and your journey, because that's a lot of what everyone listening to the show is seeking and looking for. They may or may not be happy with their jobs. That may be their story. It may not. I know that's your and my story. We both came from a corporate scenario that was toxic, and we had to find our true passions. But all in all, I think that this is something and a message that our listeners absolutely need to hear. Another thought, I mentioned earlier on the show that I've had the opportunity, to work with you a little bit. And James was kind enough to let me get started in my career as an accountability coach and let me do some follow-up with him through a couple associations. And it was a really fun way to practice on the goal setting and the achievement and follow-up processes of it all. But I'd like to just kind of make that mention, but open up the invitation to have you talk a little bit more about your book, Small Steps, Big Feet, and tell us a little bit about some of the big nugget principles that you'd love to share without giving away too much, because we want people to go and get this book and to learn more about it. Because, and maybe the question is this, what principles are our listeners going to find absolutely invaluable as they read the book, Small Steps, Big Feet?
Well, and I'd like to say there's a whole bunch of things they've never heard before, but the reality of it is most people are going to know. I mean, if you're not in a healthy situation, you're going to know what you need to do. It's a matter of doing it. The real kernel of the book is that by doing small things consistently over time, you're going to see big results. I should point out for your listeners, it's not feet, F-E-E-T, it's feet, F-E-A-T. So it's accomplishment, small steps, big feet. Do them consistently over time. Here's one of the nuggets. I don't necessarily emphasize this so much in the book, but when I started on the weight loss path that I was on, I worked at two different locations, one of them 4 days a week and the other one day a week. I drive to that one, is a little further away. And, I started once I realized, I sit down and I've got an armrest that appears, it's my stomach. I can cross my arms and there's my stomach. I can rest them on. Well, I was always skinny growing up. So I made the decision that I was going to get down to my ideal body weight. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's easy to put weight on. It's harder to take it off. And I empathize with everyone that's going down that path. But it can be done. But it's small things consistently over time. Regular exercise, eating right. And there's some specific things, some tools that I use. I mean, there's things you can do to build success into your process. But you've got to do them over time. So, the place I was at 4 days a week, no one ever said anything. But the one I would go to once a week, after a month or so of me being on this journey, they'd look at me and say, "Hey, have you lost weight?" And yeah, I did. You don't notice it. So that's a really important principle for people to understand. When you start doing these things from day to day to day to day, you're not going to see a big difference in your own life. You just won't. Your scale will tell you, but your incremental in the case of health, it will tell you. Your bank account in the case of your finances, but it's not going to be, overnight change. It's going to be sustained over time. Now, there's going to be a huge difference in a year versus in a week, but only if you do those small steps consistently over time. So in the book, I outline what I consider those small steps, or some of those small steps, in those 4 areas. What can you do for your personal growth and development? Small things, simple things, you do these consistently over time. I mean, you got to cut some of the distractions out. We live in a world of distractions to no end. Cut those out, but what are you going to replace them with? Okay, well, I'm going to start listening to personal growth and development type materials when I'm commuting. Okay, I'm not going to listen to news anymore. I don't do that. Sometimes that can be a challenge. I do real estate investing. I don't even know what the interest rates are at now. I haven't gotten a mortgage recently. And I discovered yesterday, I was talking to my sister, they're almost back at lows again, But the cost that it is on your mind for and I'll call it toxicity, to just feed your mind with the negativity that is the news. Everything that's wrong in the world is what's going to be on the news. Well, that does not do you any good, and you're not going to change that just by virtue of the fact that you're hearing it all day long. So small steps. What can you do there? What can you do with your finances? Most of us have an idea of what we can do. We either don't know how, or we lack the motivation. You mentioned our first connection, which was accountability partner, and I was already doing that. I'd mentioned that at the time. I had my own accountability partner that I'd been working with for a couple of years. That was a principle that I learned through this process. Dramatic growth, if you've got to answer someone every, ours were Monday mornings, and say, how'd you do last week? Okay, what are you going to work on next week? That's a small step. It's not hard to do. Find someone that is willing to do that. Growth, goal-oriented person that wants that same thing. Set that connection up with them, get the appointed time, and do it every week. It's not hard. Nothing hard about that at all. And yet, how many people do that? Most people don't do that. Vast majority of people won't do that. So small steps, those are the things. Growth, personal growth, the goal-setting process, your finances, and your health. And not everyone needs all 4 of those. And I found, John, when I have an 8-week, I call it, an 8-week online course that I go over each of these areas. Not everyone needs each one. I've also found that, I'm trying to condense what for me was 8 years into 8 weeks. It's really trying to drink from a fire hose. So I'm trying to fine tune that a little bit. When I work one-on-one with people, then we kind of tailor it, and it's a longer time period. It's more like 3 months. And some of the guys are, they're great. They're former athletes in college or whatever else. Okay, just maintain, but your finances aren't in so great a shape, or you're not doing anything for personal development. You're living in distraction, and what are you doing for your goals? Do you have a goal setting system? So I don't know if I answered that question or if I'm off rambling again now, but
no, yeah, you thoroughly answered it, and I kind of wanted to lead into that course a little bit, in case our listeners are interested. But I also wanted to add to this topic. There are several levels here of developing wealth, right? And there's the personal small steps you need to take. But let's talk about our listeners who are in a situation where they have a partner. They're married. They're with someone that is part of that process, the finances, they live with them, or whatever it might be. There's someone that's an external part of their life that is a huge contributor. How do the individuals work on the small steps and do that with someone else as well? Like, what would you advise, or and maybe that might be a a reason why to jump in the 8-week course. But tell me a little bit about the process with partners, married couples, dating, engaged, whatever it might be.
That's a great point, John. I'm glad you bring that up. I haven't historically focused on. I was doing a public speaking class, and I was teaching the principles in term to that group for practice for what for getting better at public speaking, and the teacher came up to me after. Actually, there were two main instructors, and they said, we think you should do one for couples finance. And it's like, man, that's a great suggestion, because if that's the boat you're in, the challenge often is one partner, one spouse is one, you're not on the same page. One wants to go gung-ho and the other one's more conservative, more concerned, more I'm happy where I'm at thing. And quite honestly, that was the boat that I was in. I love my sweetheart to no end. I am far better because she is my wife than I would be otherwise, no question. But we do have different backgrounds financially and from a health perspective. So in the health one, your segue made me think of this. My first foray into making the decision, I'm going to actually start losing weight. I'm an engineer. I'm visual management. I put a graph up there. Here's my weight. Here's my target date. Here's my planned, linear line down to my target weight. And guess where I stuck it? I stuck it on the kitchen wall because I want to see it. Well, my dear wife interpreted that to mean me telling her that I think she needs to lose weight. That's not a good message for a spouse, and that's not what I intended either. So there are challenges in a marriage relationship, in a committed, intimate relationship, particularly if your spouse, your partner is not on the same page as you. Financially, it was very similar. I tried for years. I'm a geek engineer background. But this is years ago. We're newly married. We got a few small kids at the time, and I remember every Saturday evening I'd be sitting at my computer typing in all our receipts in the QuickBooks, because I want a budget. I know we need to, but for me, I got to know where we're at. I mean, we weren't formally budgeting. You do what everyone else does. You spend money till you run out of money, and then you stop until the next money comes in and you start spending again. I mean, your budget is your bank balance, and when it goes to zero, you stop. Well, unless you are like us and we have overdraft, and then it's till you go to negative 1,000, and then you stop, and then you wait till you get the next one and go in. And we lived that way for probably up until 10 years ago. Well, I'm committed. I've got the help now, by this time, of some of my older teenage kids. I say the help. Another little funny story. I mean, I had my son, my responsible dad that I am, I have my son balancing our checkbook. It's good for him to learn how to do that. Well, he was so much more financially responsible emotionally than I was. I had to have him stop doing it because he would get so uptight, because every pay period we would go into the overdraft. I mean, that was our budgeting system, which was not a system. It was basically we spend until we're a little below zero and then stop and wait for the next paycheck to come in and do it. And he got so uptight about that, okay, never mind, Wesley, I'll do this again, because I'm used to that. So that's just how life is, right? Well, it was very similar when we sat down to formally, I'm starting to apply these principles that I wrote about in my book. I'm starting to actually do what I know I should be doing. And one of them is set a monthly budget. I like to call it a spending plan, because the budget has, I say the word budget, most people, if you ask them and they're not doing it, it'll bring a knot into their stomach, right? And that's exactly how it was for my sweetheart again. The first time we actually sat down at the table to budget, and I was leveraging my kids who were interested, particularly this son, I mean, she was visibly, I could look at her and see the stress in her eyes and in her, the body language for us doing that. Because in her mind, it was, you're going to tell me I can't buy things that I need. And what if I really need them? You're going to tell me I can't buy them. That's what budgeting is. And for a lot of people, that's how they see it. And so there are unique challenges in a relationship. The good news is one person can make all the difference. It doesn't take both. One person can make all the difference in that scenario. But it does take some more commitment, and it does take some more skills. It takes some communication skills. You got to make sure your heart is in the right spot, that you're not trying to be controlling and whatever else. And for those that may be, listening to this and resonating with this, I'm actually, so I taught one workshop to a couples finance success workshop, and had, half dozen, 7 couples in there, and it was pretty good. And there is a need for that, because there's a lot of people where they know, it's like, you're on a different page than I am, and you got one dominating and the other one, and they want to make it work, but they don't know how. So right now I'm developing a 7-week, I say developing, I've got it outlined. I'm going to start the beta group. And so if anyone listening to this is interested, then you got to get in touch with me. I've done some market research. I'm finishing up a little bit more market research to kind of fine tune what I put together. And some of it is a little different. It's really dealing with the differences, but also the how-to, different backgrounds. Someone grows up in a scarcity mentality. I've got going all over. I got a cousin he's a multimillionaire. He's probably a decamillionaire now in real estate investing, but he grew up like I did. I just saw him at a funeral not too long ago, and he's so proud because he bought a truck for $750. It's a 2019, what do you call the title, rebuild title, because it burned up on the freeway. He just wanted the bed. He paid $750 for the title. This is a multimillionaire, probably a decamillionaire. He's got all kinds of money. And his pride is the fact that he got this truck for $750. He says, I can sell the differential for $1,400, and all I want is the bed. I just made $750. And I was going, dude, freaking go out and buy the truck. You can do that if you want, but that is his mindset about money. Now that's got him very successful in a marriage relationship. That's often the challenge. You've got one partner that grew up in a different economic environment, different instruction, different role models from parents. So a big part of it is getting on the same page. So what should it be? What does it look like? What's the process? A big key to success, individually or in a marriage, is not setting the spending plan or the budget every month, but tracking to it every week. If you have to do that manually, you're much less likely to do it than if you can automate it. So one of the things we go over that is, okay, well, here's how you automate it. And then it's now a half an hour a week process. Takes me 45 minutes a day to get through the bathroom. Why can't we spend half an hour a week to sit down together, look at our finances, and figure out if we're on track, and if we're off track, how do we get back on track? So again, those are some of the small steps, but bringing the two together, I use the analogy, if you're in a room, if you're looking at this, if you imagine a big rock with 2 ropes tied on it, and like a tug of war type thing, and one person's pulling one direction, the other one's pulling the other direction, well, where's that rock going to go? It's not going to go anywhere, or it's going to go a different direction than either one wants if they're not pulling in the same direction. That's the same thing like 2 partners in a marriage relationship or in a relationship, and the rock is your finances. If you're going different directions, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go where either of you want it to. But if you can imagine where you get lined up and you're pulling the same direction, boy, you're just going to move that a lot faster. And life's a lot better when you can get on the same page with your finances. So anyone interested, please email me, info@mytriumphtrading.com. There's a couple other ways you can get in touch with me, is mentorwithjames.com. That would really be for one, if you want to set up a strategy session, a half-hour strategy session. Let's look at where you're at. If there's something I can help you with, fantastic. If not, then I'm happy to tell you that too. Maybe I know someone that can help you in your specific situation, but if any of these things resonate with you, I love helping people break through some of these things that held them back, because they've held me back. So.
And for our listeners, you guys, this is exactly why we love working with people like James. There's so much value that can be gained by just reaching out, setting up an appointment, having a half-hour breakthrough session or a call, to maybe engage in in one of his courses, or at the least, guys, go check out his book, Small Steps, Big Feet. But the reason why we love working with people like James, and the reason why they follow our passion and our methodologies, is that they provide value first. And the value he just offered was, look, all we need to do is get on a conversation to figure out where you're at, and we can find a resource for you, whether it's a resource that I have in my wheelhouse or I know someone else who can help you. And I love that you said that, James. We appreciate that, because that is the perpetual value that we continue to drive through the show and through our philosophy. So we appreciate you saying that. And again, if you are listening to this, you need to get in touch with James, because even if you are just questioning, whether I'm happy or if I have a balanced life or if I understand what wealth means or if I'm actually struggling with my job, wherever you might be, you might have a challenge that he can help you with and that he can share the right resources with. So I think that's an incredible feature that we should will promote. And obviously that will be found in the show notes, all those links and those ways to get a hold of James. Now, James, one thing we like to do here on the show is we like to challenge our listeners to do one thing based off the content and information we just shared. And we got to talk so much about some really cool things, and we actually breached the surface. So we got to a little bit deeper conversation, which I loved. In your mind and in your opinion, what's one challenge that we can issue to our listeners that they can apply today, other than getting a hold of you, of course, and buying your book and learning more about your course and stuff like that? What is one challenge that we can offer and issue to our listeners that will help them take one small step forward in their life today?
Well, let me tell you too, the book is available on Amazon, but you can, if you go to my website, mytriumphtraining.com, and go to the book page, we'll send it to you for the cost of shipping and handling. So you can get the hard copy for the cost of shipping and handling, $8.95. It'll cost you more if you go to Amazon. But the one challenge I'd probably suggest, and this might be counterintuitive because I haven't talked to health so much, but they all relate to each other. If you start to discipline yourself in one area of your life, it's a lot easier to discipline yourself in another area of life. If you're not exercising, you know what? My strength exercise routine is this. I do push-ups, I do planks, and I do squats or lunges. I do 3 sets of each of those 3 times a week. That would be my challenge for you. And I'm not even going to tell you how many, because for every person it's different. If you haven't done any push-ups, 5 push-ups might be the max you can do right now. But if you start doing 5 push-ups 3 times a week, in just a few days or a few cycles, you'll be able to do 10. And after you get to 10, that'll be easy. And now, and when I started planking, 30 seconds was painful. Now I'm doing 3 sets of 3 minutes 3 times a week, and it's still painful, but that's where the growth comes. So that's why we do that. So that would be my small step challenge for you listeners. If you're not exercising regularly already, then start doing that. And if nothing else, start with that. Do push-ups, do either sit-ups or planks. I like planking because I think it works a few more muscles. And then lunges or squats to get your lower body muscles into it too. 3 exercises, don't need any special equipment. You can do it at home. Start doing that.
Amazing. I love that you made that challenge, because for those of you listening, that is super intellectual and intuitive, because we both know, James, on the back end of that, the minute you start having a regular commitment to exercising, there's this amazing thing biologically that happens in our body and in our blood. When blood is flowing and blood is moving, all of a sudden we're more capable and more awake to start doing other things in our lives, to start taking action on other things. And it's the small wins, like physical activity, that lead to, let's call it the wealth of experience that comes with what people like to seek. And so I love that was your challenge. Very, very intuitive. Listeners know that is one of the best challenges we've had on the show, because of how simple and how impressive and how it will lead to continuous increased action in your life. So I really appreciate that.
Well, in fact, let me jump in. I'm probably not over time, but I would, when I started doing this, I was still in the corporate world, and I would find myself, I was in a training environment. Well, sometimes I'm not training, and I hadn't done it yet. I'd go find an empty office, and I would, gratefully, you didn't work up too much of a sweat doing that set of exercises. It was strength. So I would go find an empty office somewhere at work and get my push-ups and I was doing sit-ups at the time, and my lunges or squats in an office at work, no extra time, not taken away from my employer because I had to be in the vicinity. So, you can build those into your schedule without much, you don't have to go to the gym. You don't need special equipment. So you can start doing those things today. So anyway.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate that. So again, please, if you're listening today, we will hope that you'll go check out James Stephenson. And in the show notes, we have information on how to get a hold of him and his website and how to reach out and to jump on a call with him to get through a breakthrough session of sorts. And we hope that you'll take advantage of that. Lots of value and lots of content and lots of information that you can obtain just by listening and by taking a little bit of action. We challenge you to go out and exercise just a few sets a day. And that's incredible. Well, James, thank you so much for being on the show with us. And this has been such a fun conversation. I know that we talked about this earlier, but for those of you listening, we're going to have James on the show as much as we can, just because of how valuable this is for us, as well as the value that is extended to our listeners. So we really appreciate you. And thanks for telling us a little bit about you and your story.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the opportunity. So glad we connected.